Okay, so last class we actually spent some time talking about surveys. We talked about online versus offline surveys. We also talked about, self-completed surveys versus interviewer-led surveys, non-self-completed surveys. Then we talked about some of the advantages and disadvantages of each. I also noticed the book material is a little bit out of date, so I try to update it. For example, I talked a little bit about, how how telephone surveys, how the response rate is really, really low these days. So I've just got about 15 minutes. I'm just going to do this as a video. It's mostly common sense stuff, and it's on selecting the appropriate survey method. So when we select the type of survey we're going to do, it's going to be based on various things. The first is, just what sort of situation are we in? So let's just kind of have a quick example. And let's just think a bit about the budget. So, if we were, for example, Walmart, we talked about wanting to do a survey on environmental friendliness, about stop giving away reusable bags, or Ford surveying millennials. Typically we've got billions of dollars at stake. There'll be a large budget, and we'll have an internal marketing research resources. So we'll have a big department. We'll have internal resources. But we also have enough money, for maybe specialized third party marketing research. If we're a small mom and pop store, if we're just maybe a business on the main street of Starkville, so we're just a small store, we're probably not going to have much of a dedicated marketing research budget. So we're probably going to have to do the marketing research as part of our everyday tasks. We'd maybe engage with our consumers, maybe have a short survey for our social media, but we want stuff that's not going to cost a lot or is going to be almost free or just utilizes some of, for example, human resources that we already have, or maybe even hire an internship student. The completion time frame, again, pretty much common sense, but if we think of like, an immediate, we've got something long term, so maybe changing environmental preferences as changing slowly over, say, a 20-year period, then maybe we don't have to have things immediate. Maybe it would be like, we want to have this completed within 12 months as part of our overall strategy. But if we had, for example, the competitor has just released, so if we're Ford, the competitor's just released a new product, which we think is kind of going to really impact our market. So, we have short term, say, for example, the government's, if we're a retailer, the government's introduced some sort of new rule about where we can locate stores. So if there's maybe government competitor action, then we maybe want much shorter, maybe say, let's just say 3 to 6 months. I would always, particularly for a larger firm, if somebody was to say we want marketing research and we want it within a month, it's probably not going to be of the kind of greatest quality. Okay, so let's just think a little bit about the completeness of the data. So with completeness, internet surveys generally have an advantage is you can kind of force completion of items. Getting a little bit kind of statistical, when we talk about completeness, you can have non-respondent where respondents just don't answer. You could have instances where respondents only complete partial of the survey. So online surveys would allow you to force completion, but if you force too much, people might just kind of drop out. Another thing to think about is online. Maybe not everybody, particularly in developing nations, has access to online surveys. So if you have what we call maybe a bottom of the pyramid demographic, or maybe an older demographic that doesn't have access to, the internet. That's going to be very, very rare these days, but, e.g., we'd have maybe survey ages 70 plus on care home preferences. This might be a problem that these people don't necessarily want to go with online. So care home, I'll just put preferences. So in this case, we may want some sort of in-person, interviews with these people rather than just asking them to sign up in a complicated form online. So that might err us towards in person. Generalizability, if we have a large enough sample, then we should be generalizable. And I'll say we'll talk more about this next week. With large enough kind of random sample, then we should be generalizable. And for a quantitative survey, generally, the bigger the sample, this kind of relates to this, the bigger the sample, the more precise. If I was, for example, to take 10,000, let's just do a really silly example. We're trying to work out how many calories students are, how many calories students are actually consuming per day. Maybe we're doing it for a weight loss company. And I was to survey maybe 2 people at random. I might get 2 football linemen, or I might get 2 people on a crash diet. If I survey 1,000 people, I'm pretty much more guaranteed to get a much more representative sample of the population. Okay, so that was basically just some situational characteristics. And again, a lot of this stuff is kind of common sense. I'll just show you, I don't actually need to go back to the slide deck or write on this. But this was something I did with Dr. Adams and Dr. Landers. This was probably, the collection was about 4 or 5 years ago. So this was getting a survey using a Qualtrics survey panel. And Qualtrics kind of charge per response. And they have a panel that's kind of demographically and socioeconomically identical to the general US population. So we wanted to sample 500 people from this panel. And Qualtrics charged us it would probably be more now, but almost $5 per respondent. And that cost us about $2,375. So again, that was mid-priced. If I was Walmart, I could probably sample, 10,000 people like this. If I'm a small mom and pop store, then I'm not going to suddenly spend $2,000 for a little bit of marketing research. It's really going to kind of eat, that's going to be the cost of an employee for a month, and I just wouldn't be able to afford it. Okay, so let's go to the next kind of example. And this is talking a little bit about, task characteristics. So say, for example, we have task difficulty. If we have an online survey, say, let's go back to Ford and the car example. Online surveys, we can do quite a lot. We can ask for preferences. We can talk about features. We can compare different cars. Online surveys are getting more and more sophisticated. But, we are limited. If we want people to interact with the car, we might want to take them down to a showroom and sit in the car with a trained interviewer. So maybe we have utilize the car. Or even build up a simple mock-up of the car, or chat about, maybe somebody's have an interview about driving habits. This would be, much more kind of offline with an interviewer. And again, the stimuli just means what we're showing the consumers. So, this is I'll just put a little note here in case you get this in exam. So this is just what the stimuli, it's what the respondents, are being tested on. So if it's a simple kind of a text question or a picture, you could probably do it online. If it's an actual maybe, prototype car, you want to maybe interact or even drive it, then it would be, offline. Um, I would call it like a demo. And the amount of information we ask from respondents. I guess it depends. Online surveys, as I mentioned, they tend to be quite quick these days. We don't want to have an hour, unless we're paying people a lot, we don't want an hour-long online survey. Um, but we might want a more in-depth kind of interviewer survey. But generally, would say, it really depends on the situation. So maybe online. It's probably best practice and kind of offline pencil and paper surveys, though, as I mentioned, we rarely use these, to keep it under 30 minutes. And in fact, if it's a non-paid survey, we'd probably want it no more than like 5 or 10 minutes. And then the topic sensitivity. This was an example I even gave in class. So if I was to ask you about, for example, cheating in exams, um, your drug usage, etc., risky behavior, you might actually want to give what would be a more socially acceptable answer, i.e., I don't use drugs, I don't cheat in exams, than would actually be the truth. Okay, so finally, we'll just talk a little bit about respondent characteristics. So again, this really depends on the specific context. If we want maybe a good diversity, so say for example we want, let's just say we're doing a survey on music preferences. And we want to get, a good diversity. We want kind of diversity in terms of age, ethnic group, stroke, economic status. Then probably we'd want something, maybe we'd want a more quantitative survey. We'd maybe want to, like I just showed the one at the example, we'd maybe want a panel that was representative of the population. But maybe we're doing a survey on people who are underserved in a certain population, or maybe we want to do a survey of a very specific, maybe music genre. Then maybe we'd actually just go to a concert and where that music was being played, and maybe do some intercept surveys, kind of chat with people there. So it really just depends a little bit. And again, as I said, online surveys have become much, much more flexible than they were even like 10 or 20 years ago. The incident rate, this is really just, how much of the population we're interested in. Walmart, say for example, we were Walmart and we wanted all US adults, then we're probably going to have some random online panel. We're going to have a Nielsen or a Qualtrics panel. So we're going to have a representative panel. But if we're dealing with a medical condition, how to best help people with a medical condition, and there's only 1,000 people in the US, or let's say more. Let's just say there's only 10,000 people. Then we're going to maybe try and have a more detailed interview survey with only a few people. Okay, so the last little section's on respondent participation. Let's just think of a few examples for ability to participate. So say, for example, let me just get this right. Say, for example, I'm trying to interview CEOs about maybe their environmental initiatives. Then again, this would probably have a very low, ability. These people are incredibly busy. I'm probably just, I may be doing some survey for some random research bank or research organization, and these people may not have the time to participate. You also think of, geography. If, for example, we want a global consumer survey, it may not be possible to survey consumers in certain countries. So maybe a global consumer country survey. And, more developing nations, we may lack detailed records of consumers. There may be issues of infrastructure. So an online survey may not be particularly good if only, say, 50% of the population have access to the internet. We may have other issues. For example, if a war's going on, there may be information, out of date information. So quite often, again, quite common sense, but there may be issues where people are unable to participate. In such instances, for CEOs, you'd maybe want a very, very quick internet survey that's going to take maybe no more than 10 minutes. That we may still not get them all to participate, but that might actually have a better response rate than, for example, having to meet somebody for an hour in-person survey, which would not be a good idea. And the final couple of things, wrong one. We've also got, and it's kind of related to the ability to participate, there's the willingness to participate. Again, if it's maybe just things not willing, things like, again, aforementioned sensitive subjects. If I've not got time, lack of time, compensation. I'm constantly getting survey requests through from other academics, and if I know the people, I might fill in the survey, but if it's somebody I don't know, I'm very, very unlikely to fill in the survey. And then kind of knowledge level, let's just give a quick example. Imagine that I want people to do a survey of statistical software. And we're comparing 3 packages. We're comparing R versus SAS versus SPSS. If you've never used those packages, then you're not going to have appropriate knowledge level. And just to give one more example, say, for example, I was doing a survey on some kind of niche hobby. Say, for example, geocaching. Again, if people have never geocached and have no knowledge of geocaching, then they're really not going to want to participate in the survey, whether online or particularly offline survey. Okay, so that was just kind of a few little points, mostly kind of common sense, but I just wanted to um, add a little bit of information on those so you can kind of watch them at your own leisure.